we're over the hill on Optimal Play. I think this is our 6th of 10 videos. We're looking at the leveled up cards from Harvey's deck in the Investigator Starter decks of Arkham Horror, the card game. My name is Brandon.
I'm Steven.
And yeah, welcome back. It's a Monday night as we record this, so we're relaxing after a hard day's work. Steven just came in from the rain, it looks like.
Shower, I had to look good for the cast.
I appreciate it. I'm feeling chill tonight. I'm sipping a what I assume is Harvey's go-to cocktail, a Cosmo.
You were supposed to say Harvey Wallbanger.
Oh man, I should have made a Harvey Wallbanger. I even know what that is. Well, I don't think we're gonna go back and restart the video, as tempted as I am. I'll come up with a good.
Just edit over what you say, like in post.
There we go. Just blur the lips and dub over it.
Yeah. I'm having a Modelo. We were having fish tacos for dinner. So.
Oh, I had shrimp tacos for dinner. Weird.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Huh. Great minds, I guess.
Taco Mondays.
Well, speaking of great minds, what we learned about Harvey Walters is that he's extremely well studied, as represented by him holding the entire deck of cards in his hand most of the time. I think I don't know, what are you looking to see in the leveled up cards? What do you want his deck to do as it gets experience?
Maybe a way to better mitigate his weakness, because I feel like playing around it for a few games is fine, but like it might get annoying to have to play around it so much for 8 games.
Yeah, to recap, that was like for every 3 cards in his hand, he takes 1 damage when he draws that weakness.
So like,
yeah.
I would love to go all in on the big hand style and like try to get to 15 cards. Mm-hmm. But so I'd like a way to mitigate his weakness. Also, I think we counted it out, and actually the starter cards only got you to 14 hand size.
That's what I was gonna say. You got these the like Celiano fragments that reward you for having 15 cards in hand, and his beginning deck can't get there. So I want to see even more cards in hand. Damn it.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's get literally the whole deck in hand. He just takes a horror every time he would draw a card. What could go wrong?
Or you can just have one reusable card that's really good, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah. If you're holding 20, well, I guess if you're holding 29 of your cards, or like what is it? It would be 30 cards that you could hold. Then he's just gonna have 31 cards that you could hold. He's just gonna be cycling his 2 weaknesses over and over, right?
Well, I can't remember. Maybe some of them you can stay out. I don't. Oh no, Oh yeah, no. That's right. The damage one, definitely not.
No, yeah. If he's cycling through his deck every turn, he's also cycling past his weakness, basically killing him every time. So I guess that's not optimal.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find a solution to that too.
Yep.
Want to take us into the first card?
Sure. Library Docent, a 1 cost, 1 XP ally, and Miscatonic traded. Reaction: after Library Docent enters play, return a tome asset you control to its owner's hand. Play a different tome asset by title from your hand, reducing its cost by 2.
Huh. Okay, so these little the allies with no name tags and it comes into play effect are not usually ones that get a lot of attention, right? There's like the research librarian that searches your deck for a tome, which I started playing that again when Mandy came out a little bit, but other than that, it's been out since the core set, and I've never used it much.
Well, I feel like that one and the draw 2 one do see some play, often in decks that really focus on cycling them. Maybe they play Calling in Favors, or maybe they just let them die. So yeah, I think those 2 are reasonably popular.
I mean, I think that's what you do with this type of ally, is you play them and try to soak damage and horror onto them and kill them as fast as possible, and then play a longer term ally, right? Because it's a big setback to not be using your ally slot for an ongoing powerful effect, because there are so many really good options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this one you would not want out very long. I think really only the draw 2 one is the only one with a permanent effect, because it also increases your hand size by 2.
Oh, that's true.
I really like that it returns the tome to its owner's hand. So if what's his face from the core set, the Guardian Seeker, uh,
The Roland?
Roland. Yeah, I want to say Randolph because I was playing Dreamers recently. If Roland like leaderships you a tome, and then you return it, then
You mean teamwork?
yeah, teamwork. If he teamworks you a tome and then you return it with this, it goes back to Roland's hand.
You really like your card swapping hijinks lately.
Cards are more fun when they didn't come from your deck.
um, yeah. So overall, I don't like. So here's what I need tomes to have in order for this to be interesting. I need tomes that have interplay effects, and I don't think we've seen any. Right? Like if there are tomes that you could bounce back to your hand, and I get that charges are probably kind of what this has in mind. You can return a tome to your hand, and it will come out again with secrets recharged.
Upgraded Old Book of Lore is a pretty good one for that.
Yeah, and there's upgraded, or not upgraded, but there's a Scroll of Prophecies. The downgraded encyclopedia. What's that?
Divermus Mysterious. You get rid of Doom.
Interesting. That's true. This is a solution to that Doom. Okay. So I can see you getting some tricks along those lines in, but in general, I don't. Yeah, upgraded Old Book of Lore with its searching for a card and a discount on it. That's the only one that I think I gladly use 3 times in a game and want to use even more. I think most tomes, I'm happy enough with the number of secrets they give me in the first place to where I don't think I would complicate my ally slot to bounce them and play them again.
Yeah,
but that's just me. Maybe we'll see some new stuff. We have a slight pattern now of evaluating cards and getting to the end of the pack and reevaluating all the cards. So, all right. Next, we have a level 1 Glimpse the Unthinkable. It's a level 0 Seeker event. It's an insight, and it says draw 1 card. Shuffle any number of non-weakness cards from your hand into your deck. Then draw that many cards. Ignorance is a bliss you cannot afford. So tell me if I'm remembering this right. This is a lower level version of a level 4 or 5 card that lets you shuffle cards into your deck from your hand and then fills your hand to your hand size. Does that sound right?
Right.
Okay. Which, that card would be ridiculous for Harvey. This card, not as much.
Yeah, it doesn't really combo with big hand size the way that one did. It is a lot less experience. I think that one was like 4 or 5.
Yeah, right. And so this, like, as far as why they would put this out with Harvey, I think of it as, well, it's kind of a stepping stone to spend some XP and then upgrade it later. Like, that's always welcome. But yeah, a card that says draw 1 card printed on it. Like, and then you can cycle cards into your deck, draw that many cards, but yeah, it doesn't increase the size of your hand at all.
Yeah, and if you think about it, shuffling and then redrawing is a form of search. But seekers are really good at search.
Yeah.
Like, is this the best way to search? I don't think so.
Yeah, they've got just better options than this if they're looking for specific cards. I could imagine a world where there are cards that benefit you for some reason while they're in your hand or when you draw them or something and you want to shuffle them back in so you can get them again later, but those cards don't exist yet.
Yeah, whereas
I don't.
The reverse, which are cards that benefit from you searching over them, was a whole theme last cycle. So there's actually like a whole bunch of cards that only synergize with a Mr. Rook or a Eureka or a Backpack. They don't synergize with this.
Yeah, that don't work with this. So, from the point of view we touch on a lot, it does have double icons. So, like, to be a perception that has this option instead of its draw card. You know, that's interesting, I guess, from that angle. But I think that's the main reason I would be putting this into the deck is for the double intellect icons. And I would maybe sometimes play it for this effect.
Yep, I agree.
All right, moving on.
Esoteric Atlas, 3 cost, 2 XP, item and tome. It has 4 secrets, and you can spend a secret to choose a revealed location up to 3 connections away from the location. Move to that location. think the original was up to 2 locations, right?
Yeah, it was a shorter distance. It was level 0, I believe. And it probably had less secrets. If I were to guess, it's probably 3 secrets. 4 is kind of a lot. I bet that's an upgrade, but I don't know that I ever played that card. So
I
it's
mean,
not.
it was. I remember it was real bad because you spent an action. Yeah, both of these take an action. Also, I didn't say that. You spent an action to go 2 locations, but you could just play Pathfinder and spend no actions to go 1 location, which is basically the same thing. But it had no limits. It took no slots. There's just a lot of advantages to Pathfinder over the original. But this one does go quite far.
It goes farther, and unless I'm reading this wrong, a big difference from something like Pathfinder or using shortcuts and that kind of thing to move around is that this teleports you, right? It just says move to that location. It does not say move one location at a time until you get there or something like that. So you're jumping over any enemies that are in the way, right?
I think that's right, though I'm not 100% sure. But I agree that the fact that it doesn't say one at a time does sort of indicate that.
Yeah, I think that this is worded like astral travel, that kind of thing. It's just move to that location is how that's worded, and that's more of a teleport. So
it does not say disengage from enemies, though. So I think if there's enemies currently on you, they would go with
you. True. Yes. Like if you want to take the opportunity to attack, you can use it while you have enemies, which Pathfinder doesn't allow, but they would come with you. So how I doubt you would find yourself doing that too often. Maybe just to move to the resign location and get out.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, I guess the scenarios are pretty airtight as far as like because in theory this card could let you, if there's a revealed location, this would let you jump there even if there are unrevealed locations in between, like you and the destination, right? And I'm wondering if there's any kind of hijinks where you could skip over a location that's hard to unlock or anything, but I guess not. And I guess elusive and those kinds of cards would already be doing that. So
yeah, the revealed location thing is actually a fairly significant downside. Like Pathfinder does not have that downside.
True. Yeah.
Also, the item or the hand slot.
Yeah, it's a neat card. Like it reads really powerful, and I just don't see why I would put it into a deck. Out of all the secret mobility options and kind of the downsides of it doesn't get you away from enemies.
I think there's 2 reasons. One is I think Pathfinder should be tabooed.
Fair.
The other is if you're playing a lot of cards with tome synergy, that could be the reason. Which we've now seen an upgrade.
Yeah, that's true. We've seen the new ally Witten Green in this pack, who helps you search the top of your deck to find tomes. Now we've seen this library docent who I don't like. Why would you return this to your hand? It's so that.
Well, if it was out of
sequence. Okay. You can let me rewind for a second. I feel like we didn't dwell on actually the important part of library docent. It returns a tome to your hand, and then it plays a different tome asset with a discount of 2. And I feel like we didn't talk about that at all. That's actually interesting because it's a 1-cost ally that can give you a 2 discount on a tome. So it's an econ card.
Sort of. It does require you to have drawn another tome. You have to be going fairly heavy tome.
Drawn you have to have drawn 2 tomes, played one of them, and be in a position where swapping them is something you want to do. So it's niche, but I just wanted to make sure. I was like rereading it in my hand and thinking, oh, I don't feel like we did that part justice. I do think that is really interesting. So maybe Esoteric Atlas isn't the card that makes Library Docent a star in my deck, but I could see maybe if there are some really cheap tomes and then some very pricey tomes, and Library Docent kind of helps you bridge that gap. I could see that being really interesting.
There was also the ally that came out last cycle that lets you use a tome twice, and you probably don't need to move 6 locations, but you
Abigail,
could if
right?
You wanted to.
Yeah. Is that what Abigail did? Was she let you use the same tome twice, like as a free action?
Yes.
I can't.
Yeah. So I mean, if you do House Always Wins Second, She
Mm.
can really help you get out with Peter Clover if you can somehow afford
Oh yeah.
Esoteric Atlas
Oh
and
jeez.
Abigail on Dunwich XP, which is pretty difficult.
Yeah, on the second scenario of Dunwich, which classically gives you below average XP, you'd have to be playing a lot of Delve Too Deeps and extracurricular activity, I think, to get there. But it's a dream. We can dream. Okay, let's speaking about Secret Allies actually, and Witten Green. Next is a level 2 upgrade of Witten Green, the Hunter of Rare Books. It's a 4-cost asset. A Seeker ally sits in the ally slot, and she says, while you control a tome or relic asset, you get +1 willpower and +1 intellect. And then after you reveal a location or put a new location into play, exhaust Witten Green, search the top 9 cards of your deck for a tome or relic asset and draw it, shuffle your deck. And she has 2 health, 3 sanity. The one thing I don't remember, and luckily I have the cards from our previous video on the table next to me and I can check, was what the stat boosts from the original Witten was.
I think it was only book, no will.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. So it looks like the differences are she grants you willpower if you have a tome or relic. She lets you search 9 cards instead of 6, and she has 1 more sanity. And 1 more icon, but they're not matching icons. It's not that great. Okay, I think if you're building a deck that she makes sense in, one with lots of tomes probably, and especially decks with lots of tomes and they are Mandy, because then they love searching, or they're just playing research cards. I think this is a completely reasonable upgrade. I don't think that it really transforms this card from its level 0 version. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's it's slightly better for the decks that were good for that one. I think it actually, ironically, has a bit of anti-synergy with the last tome we read, because if you're playing this style, you want to always be moving into unrevealed locations. So you actually do want Pathfinder instead of Esoteric Atlas.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. Yeah, that's true. I
but
was going to say, like, well, mobility still helps you get to new locations to reveal, but that's a good point. That just does push you in that Pathfinder direction.
but there's plenty of other tomes that are good, especially if you're not playing Daisy, you might want something like the Celadon Fragments that doesn't take an action, or just something really good like the upgraded Old Book of Lore. So I could see it in Mandy. I could see in Ursula because she likes to move around and reveal stuff, and obviously Daisy.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that this is a really competitive ally at this point. I think that she was already quite good, and I think I said before that I don't think she was like Dr. Milan good, but no one can be Dr. Milan good. He's overpowered probably even after his taboo adjustment. But she is a really compelling choice, and then having this upgraded version makes her even more compelling because as your deck as your deck expects a higher baseline level of cards, she can keep up with it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I like it.
And I think sets the record for health and sanity for a Seeker ally. They're not generally great.
Oh, potentially. Yeah. Yeah, 5 total soak is quite a bit. Okay, what's next?
All right. Cryptic Writings is 0 cost, 2 XP event. That's an insight. Gain 3 resources, 4 resources instead if you have 10 or more other cards in hand. And then reaction, after you draw Cryptic Writings during your turn, play it.
So now that this is level 2, whereas the previous Cryptic Writings that we talked about before, we were kind of comparing to Emergency Cash. Now I feel like I have to compare this to Emergency Cash level 2.
It is
And
the
I
same
think it's
XP.
better.
Yeah, I would agree.
Like, I think it's better in Harvey at least because he's drawing a lot of cards, and he's likely to have a large hand size. If this is giving you 4 resources for 0 actions because you for not an action to play it, you were probably spending an action to draw it. That's really strong. This seems really good.
Yeah, I think you don't. It's not a tragedy if you draw this and it's only 3, but you probably don't put it. You probably don't emphasize upgrading this unless it's going to be 4 resources some of the time.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't think you put the XP into this until your deck is very frequently at that hand size. And do you think, if say your deck is frequently at that hand size but happens to not be when you draw this, do you still take the free play, right? You don't hold on to it.
Because you can always, I mean, you can spend an action to get a resource. Like there's no
True.
reason to not take the free action.
Yeah, okay. So you're just always going to, unless there's some very specific reason that you don't like. Well, maybe you don't play this when you draw it because you would rather it be boosting your hand size for other reasons, right? Like I guess there are reasons you might hold on to a Cryptic Writings when you draw it, but for the most part, I think it's just like, oh, free resources, sweet, and you windmill slam it onto the table.
Well, this one is also, I guess, slightly better icons. The previous one was pretty good. It was $2. This is Book and Wild, so like maybe you occasionally save it for the icons.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't think of many times that we've seen leveled up cards have that exact icon swap where they had two matching icons and now it's a wild and an icon. Because I still think you would want to almost always play this for intellects so that you get both. In which case the change didn't matter.
Yeah.
So that's a little odd, but it gives you that extra flexibility if you really need an agility pip. You got
definitely would have preferred $3 as the upgrade.
So. Yes, that would be much better. Although then it would be a really hard decision whether to play it or not when you draw it, I think.
Yeah.
At times. Interesting. I've got a plan.
What?
What's your plan? Right here. It's a level 2 Seeker event that costs 2, has a lot of icons, and says fight. This attack uses intellect instead of combat. You get +2 intellect for this test. You deal +1 damage for this attack for each clue you have. Max 3 damage. I'm pretty sure the icons were not like this on the original I've Got a Plan. Other than that, is the only difference the +2 intellect on the test?
I think it's 1 cheaper.
Oh,
I think the original was 3 cost.
Yeah. I buy that. That sounds right. Does this so I've Got a Plan was niche, like it was played by some in some decks, but was not a crazy strong card. What do you think here?
I think the 3 cost was honestly one of the main problems with it. Like it was a very powerful effect, but between the times that you would draw it when you had no clues and the times that you would draw it when you didn't have enough money, it just wasn't quite consistent enough to be like, A tier. I think the fact that, you're more likely to be able to afford it. You're more likely to be able to pass the test, even if you haven't gotten any of your intellect boosts out, is really solid.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this has become a pretty solid card. That +2 intellect, since you can't, or since you're not combining this with like your usual, like your magnifying glasses or your other intellect boosts tools that you usually apply to investigating, the +2 I think is really welcome because a lot of the time this didn't really benefit from a lot of the other cards you were putting in your deck. Yeah,
I like this a lot in any kind of Divermis deck, because it only costs 1 when you reuse it. It's also got 2 book icons, so if you maybe don't need to use it when you draw it, you can use it for 2 book icons and then play it for 1 with Divermis. So I think this would be an early upgrade for me in a Divermis deck.
Interesting. Yeah, solid. I believe it. All right. Another core set classic.
Yeah, Mind Over Matter. 1 cost, 2 XP event. Fist, Feet, and Wild icon. Insights, fast, play during your turn until the end of the round. Add your book to your to your fist and foot. Draw 1 card. Wait, is the only difference the draw 1 card? Or was the other one use book in addition, or sorry, instead of?
It was instead of, I think.
That's
this card seems awesome. I think a big part of its power level is the 2 icons and a wild, meaning this can be played for 2 combat or 2 agility. So it goes with that whole like it's like a manual dexterity with a different upside. It is a manual dexterity or an overpower still with this different upside. And that upside is like a 1-cost fast card that draws a card. So it's not even like that costly to take advantage of. And it can get, you've got 2 enemies on you. This can get you out of that jam because all of a sudden you're an evading machine. Yeah, I think this is great.
So famously, the core set decks were pretty bad, and one of the reasons was Mind Over Matter was included in Roland, and he does not want to use his book instead of his fist.
Mm-hmm.
But Roland can finally use this version because he actually would be quite a good fighter.
Yeah.
And he's normally, I think, kind of mediocre or bad at evading, and now he'd be pretty good.
Yes, I think he has like 2 agility.
So, like, if Roland has like 2 enemies on him, he can evade one of them, kill the other, and move away. And now you've dealt with 2 enemies for a fast card that draws a card.
Yeah, and it's just the right level for Roland. Right,
Yep.
it's the high end of the secret cards he can take. One other investigator that jumps out at me for this is Joe, because this is an insight. It is, in general, it's fun to put those niche insights that might be really clutch in the right moment into Joe's hunch deck that he draws 1 per round from. But you generally don't actually get rewarded for it very often. But this one is fast. His ability reduces its cost to 0, and it draws a card. So like, there's no downside. It at worst, it's like a free card draw.
Yeah, exactly. And even if he doesn't really need it that much to fight, chances are, like, most turns, like at least half of turns, Joe's gonna be fighting, and probably adding a few more to his fight stat, will help with a few of the worst tokens.
Yeah, he sure won't turn down the opportunity. And again, in a situation where he needs to evade, he's not normally very good at that. Yeah. This might get him there. Yeah, I can see this as... I've been wishing for more it feels so good playing Joe to spend your XP upgrading his hunch deck, because you see those cards so often and they're so key to the way he plays. And there's not that many leveled up insights. So I'm really happy to see a new one here.
Yeah, it also, I could see it in Ursula. Like, she already has a pretty good agility. Now it'll be like amazing.
Yep.
And her fist would be okay for some things.
Yeah, I think this card's great. I think this is gonna be a good buy for a lot of characters. Very cool. Seeking Answers. I don't think that this one is a core set classic, but it's another it's another level 2 seeker event with a lot of icons. It costs 1 resource. It's an insight, and it says investigate. If you succeed, discover 2 total clues from among your location and connecting locations. Some people need to know the truth at any cost. Some truths can cut like knives. Not as stoked on this for Joe as Mind Over Matter, but it's a cool insight, I guess. You like this?
Yes, this was actually a Dunwich classic, not a core set one.
Okay, so it's been around for a while.
Yeah, and the original just discovered a clue at a different location, which is like had a few edge cases, but 98% of the time was not worth playing a card to do.
It was always seemed interesting in theory, and you could think up all these times and like, oh, you can just pluck that clue off that hard to get location, but to spend a whole card just to get 1 clue is just usually not worth your while.
Yeah. But yeah, this one, by actually giving you an additional clue, it now does have some value. It also, for some reason, has 2 feed icons. Like, I don't understand why. I guess maybe it's indicating that you're moving 2 spaces to get the clue or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the start, I think I've given up on these. Like, from the start, I thought like, oh, the skill icons on these cards should be thematically tied to the cards, and they're just not, and they never have been. Like, 41 automatic is an agility icon, right? Like, it just isn't necessarily related. I actually would be very curious to ask MJ more about the process for how did they land on these icons on this card, right? I don't know what the design and balance approach to those could possibly be, but they seem pretty arbitrary to me a lot of the time.
Yeah, evasion has been like a theme on some secret cards, like back to like hyper awareness and I guess kind of Mind Over Matter. But it does feel like one of the weaker themes. Like it's definitely not. There's already two classes that you really associate with evasion in Rogue
Yeah.
and Survivor, so like it's definitely not me a strong part of their identity.
Yeah. That said, it does make it interesting for certain investigators more than it might have been, like Ursula, who's got decent agility, like is happy to get double icon cards. That kind of thing. Min, because she's throwing cards into other people's tests, is always interested in double icons.
Mm.
So it makes you consider the card for an extra reason, even if that reason doesn't make sense for a card about interviewing people.
I do think this is pretty good for Joe because you're almost always going to be able to play it. Like, hopefully within your turn, you can either get to a place with clues or a place next to a place with clues, you know?
Yeah, there don't have to be clues on your location. There just have to be clues in any direction from your location for this to be playable. It doesn't help your investigation at all. So if he's at a high shroud location, like that's maybe when this is least useful.
Well, then he should move to a low shroud location that's next to it.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. Yeah, I think, and what's I've Got a Plan was also an insight, and interestingly, so is Cryptic Writings. Although I don't think that makes sense in Joe's Hunch deck. We're getting a lot of new tools for Joe that I think are going to drive me to play a Joe campaign sometime soon, and toy around with them.
I've Got a Plan doesn't feel quite as good because it's just using book instead of fist, not adding them together.
Which is not really an upgrade, yeah. Although it does, if he's got some clues, it is a 4 damage attack.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Not the worst.
Not the worst. You know what's kind of the worst? This next card.
Perception level 2. It's got 3 book icons. And then if it's successful, draw a card, 2 cards instead, if it succeeds by 2 or more.
You know, I've been complaining as we looked at Manual Dexterity and Guts that these upgraded versions were turned into a class card but didn't like do something that ties in with their class's strategy. But hey, this one does, right? Seekers love to draw cards. We finally nailed it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's fine. Like if you're playing Perception and Perception's still a good card, maybe you'll spend your XP on this. But I'm not excited by these. Anything to add?
It is practiced, so Seekers can search it out with Practice Makes Perfect. So
yeah,
I think that might be one reason it's a little more desirable than some of the other ones.
And they are actually wait. I thought we'd been looking at traits before, and the others were developed trait. Is that right? And this one is expert. It gained this expert trait versus the lower level, I think. And I'm trying to remember whether they all have the same trait, and maybe it's possible that we see a card tie them to a permanent card that lets you play all of them, or something to tie them together. But now I'm not even sure if they all gained a trait, but I'm not sure it's the same across the board.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that for. I'll look that up by the time we talk about. There's surely an upgraded overpower. I'm searching for that. There's surely an upgraded overpower in Nathaniel Cho's deck at this rate, so we'll touch on that then maybe.
Sounds good.
Oh right, one of the other things we should have been expecting from these upgrades, right, is we got a new unidentified object in Harvey's deck, the Forbidden Tome. It looks like we've gotten 2 upgrade paths for it here. So here's the first one. It's Forbidden Tome Dark Knowledge. It is a 1-cost level 3 seeker asset. Got a lot of icons. It's an item, a relic, and a tome. And it says, as the halfway through the text of this card has caught my eye, but let me back up. You can only include this asset in your deck by upgrading it from Forbidden Tome untranslated, and only if you've translated the tome. Okay. Then it says 4 actions and exhaust Forbidden Tome. Move 1 damage from a player card at your location to an enemy at your location. Reduce this ability's cost by 1 action for every 4 cards in your hand to a minimum of 1 action. What? Okay. Well, so the card eventually explained its existence. My mind was boggled from the start that there was 4 actions printed on it. If I ever imagined that being printed, it would be on a rogue card.
Yeah. Totally.
but this just okay. It becomes a completely reasonable, extremely strong one action power without secrets or charges or anything limiting the uses per game. Once you have 12 cards in your hand, what do you think?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. The only issue I could see, I guess your investigator is a player card, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty good. And maybe this is the card I was talking about that helps mitigate Harvey's weakness.
True.
One issue is that secret allies like mostly only have one health, so it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to help you like reuse them. But I guess just even if it just said move one damage from your investigator to an enemy location, it also I guess can move stuff off other player cards too.
Yeah, if you're playing with a guardian with beat cop, take it off that
Yeah.
beat cop, add more uses there. All of a sudden you're like a testless damage machine between beat cop and this.
A seeker with this and Mark would be really strong. Mark
Yes.
constantly be drawing cards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he takes damage voluntarily. And then also this is not unique. So you can have if you've upgraded into both copies of this, and we'll look at the other option in a second. But if you've upgraded into 2 copies of this one, you can have them both and use it twice per turn. Seems good.
Yeah.
I think this is really cool. I do still think that the untranslated version was one of the more difficult ones that we've seen to get through. I think you had to like use it 5 different turns to draw a card and then have 10 or more cards in hand in order to translate it. So I still think that's the downside, is that you might get stuck with that for a few games before you pull that off. But the payoff's great. I like it.
Yeah.
What's the other one?
The other one's Secrets Revealed, also 4 actions, and you can exhaust it to move to a connecting location and discover 1 clue at that location. And then same thing, reduce this ability by 1 action for every 4 cards in your hand.
Oh my god. And it's you may move to a connecting location. So if you just want to discover a clue at your location, that's an option.
Yeah.
Holy cow. These are both really strong. And so yeah, it's some work to get them, and then it's some work to make them work. That's a lot of I need a thesaurus. It's a lot of effort to make it work even in each game, because you need to keep your hand very full and have really built your deck around hand size, whether it's Harvey or someone else. You're not gonna play this when you have a standard 8 card limit, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
But the payoff's big. I love it.
Yeah, I think both of these you feel pretty fine with spending 2 actions on, right? Like, you never want to spend 3 actions probably, but I feel like it's not the worst to spend 2.
It's not the well, so like move and discover a clue. That's pretty close to just 2 basic actions. So you're not really gaining anything other than
Testlessness.
The guaranteed discover a clue. But I don't know. It like a leveled up seeker doesn't have that much trouble discovering 1 clue when they want to.
Sometimes there are other things about a location that make it hard, like additional cost to investigate, downsides to discovering clues, stuff like that.
Yeah, so yeah, there are those niche opportunities, but you don't usually build your deck around those. And the dark knowledge, 2 actions to heal 1 damage and do 1 damage to an enemy. Like also, I think that's maybe more interesting to spend 2 actions on, just because those are 2 things that seekers can't do nearly as easily as moving and discovering a clue.
Yeah.
But I think that both of these really, when you drop it from that 2 actions to 1 action to trigger that, that's when it becomes like, oh my god, that's incredible.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, would only play this if I was going to build around it, but I'm excited to build around it.
And the way that this works in Daisy, if you're wondering, is she has an additional action that can be used towards tome actions. So like she would make 2, if you had 8 cards, she would make it 1 action, and if you had 12 cards, she would make it 0 actions. Because she does not reduce the number of actions,
Yeah.
she has an additional action. She gets around the minimum of 1 action that is mentioned on this.
Yeah, because she's not reducing it to 0. She's spending her tome action on it.
Yeah.
Right. And these would be fun with Abigail too, right? Getting to trigger him twice.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Neat. I'm excited. I think that this is the big punchline to the big hand size deck, right? Like, it's all kind of been like, sure, you get some stat boosts and you'll have a lot of skill icons, but there's not anything that directly translates that to like, and here's how you win as a result. Until I think this is that card.
Mhm.
This is how you turn that big hand size into I just crushed the game.
Yeah, it is probably not that important compared to Tome, but it's also a relic. So
Hmm.
if for some reason you want to play Dr. Ellie to find this instead of all the other allies that synergize with tomes, you could. I
Yeah.
think the tome synergies are stronger, but
Yeah, agreed. There's like Unearth the Ancients to get this out of your hand for no cost instead of paying its one resource if you want to go to that length. Yeah, completely agree. The relic is worth noting, but it's the tome that we care about. Farsight is next. Clearly a Hearthstone reference by notorious Hearthstone lover MJ Newman. Uh, I'm just kidding. They're not a fan of Hearthstone, but I am, and I recognize this as a shaman card. But here, it's a 2-cost seeker asset. It's a ritual and sits in the arcane slot. And then says, at fast speed, during your turn, if you have 8 or more cards in hand, exhaust Farsight to play an event from your hand, paying its cost. Beyond all points in time, beyond all angles of space, beyond the curves of reality. Hmm.
it's a
So it's
lot of trouble to get a free action. Like,
yeah,
compare this to how easily rogues get free actions.
and
This
that
is
is a
like,
rogue. That is the rogue's
yeah.
space, but still.
It's like you're spending 4 XP and you've got to pay 2 and draw this, and you got to get to 8 cards, and the extra action has to be for an event.
Yep. And you have to be able to afford that event. And it's on the off chance that you wish you could have done it more than once in turn. You can't because you exhaust this. Okay. Here's the one thing that I wonder if it's interesting. I don't have any like combos in mind. This lets you play an event in the middle of a test or something, right?
Hmm.
Because it's fast speed during your turn. I think this lets you drop. I just don't know what that would be. Like, I don't know why you would do that. I'm sure someone can make some suggestions, but yeah, the fast speed, it makes that event not only a free action, but fast, which has some space to find cool things to do, maybe, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah, and to be clear, like, free actions are really good. It's just seekers have a lot of good XP cards. So like
Yeah.
spending 4 XP and then you have to draw the card, then you have to get to 8 cards, then you have to get an event, like, it just doesn't seem like the best use of 4 XP.
And I realize that this is a completely different type of free action, but again, compare this to Pathfinder, which gives you a free action. All the only criterion to get that free action is to want to move and to not have any enemies on you. But that's something that you're going to use a lot more times per game than you're likely to use this, and it costs less XP, possibly until the taboo update. And and I think I think it costs more resources. Pathfinder costs 3, but it is slotless.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Not dazzled by this one, but that's fine. This pack has had a lot of winners, so they can't all be. I was gonna say one card left because there were 2 copies left in my hand, but they look like they're different things. So what's next?
Sure. It's a permanent Miscatonic Archaeology funding, 4 XP. It's a grant, which I
Hmm.
don't remember ever seeing before.
Nope.
Limit 1 protect. You have 2 additional ally slots, which can only be used to hold Miscatonic assets.
Hmm.
And then forced, when you take damage or horror, no more than one of that damage slash horror can be assigned to a Miscatonic asset.
Ha. Okay. You can't. I think that's both good flavor and I realize that's not the important part of this card, but I'm going to start there. that I like both the flavor of like, well, you've got the backing of the Miscatonic University. You can't just throw, you can't just throw all their people under the bus. It's also probably for balance, so that this doesn't lead to you creating a deck that's churning through allies for their soak. But wow, this is really interesting. I don't think we've ever seen. Oh wait, okay. I thought that these were slots for any Miscatonic assets, and then I was gonna have to start looking at like, are there any tomes that are Miscatonic traded? But it does say allies.
Yeah.
Okay. What do we like this? My brain's melting a little bit because I am having a really hard time remembering who's Miscatonic traded.
Pretty much all of the disposable allies are Miscatonic traded, and I think even some of the non-disposable ones might be too. You were talking at the beginning with like Library Docent, like, is there going to be a card that like makes this good? And like, certainly this is a card you would consider in that archetype.
Yeah.
I do think Charisma's like a little overpowered. So like the fact that you're getting the same number of ally slots for and only saving 2 XP as double Charisma, and then you have this like fairly substantial soak downside. Like with Charisma currently being only 3 XP, it's probably not better to do this than double Charisma.
Really? Oh, I was gonna say that this, at least for a Seeker, where a lot of their, and let me see, like, is the Rare Book Hunter? She is, like, Witten Green is Miscatonic. Milan Christopher is certainly Miscatonic.
Oh no, but the soak, but like over the course of a game, you're getting like 3 or 4 less soak than double Charisma. Because every time you kill one of those guys, you're leaving at least 1 soak on the table.
Yeah, but a lot of the time you're taking out allies with only one or the other of those anyway. To me, the biggest time that's going to be a downside is you can't throw down that second copy of Witten Green with her 2 and 3 soak when you're like redlining it near the end of the game and have her all of a sudden give you a large buffer. Like, the allies will no longer be able to, or at least Miscatonic allies will no longer be able to like save you from death as well at the end of the game. But I think that over the course of the game, I don't think this is a big setback.
I mean, I would guess it's at least 2 damage or horror per game that you're leaving on the table. I wouldn't be surprised if it's often 3. Like I think I've played more of the disposable allies than you. Like some of them are just like 1/1.
Yeah.
So like if like the one that searches for a tome, like you're not going to kill that under normal circumstances unless you can fit both on. You're like, or normally you ally and you really
normally you would still kill it just because you're trying to get Milan Christopher into play behind it.
But in this case, you have 3 ally slots. So like, if it didn't, if you had double Charisma, which also gives you 3 ally slots, you would just wait because you're not running out. Like, it's unlikely that you've run out of ally slots, so you're gonna wait until you take a damage in a horror.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know. Part of me thinks that, especially because Seeker allies are like mostly Miscatonic traded, that considering how strong Charisma already is, this looks bonkers to give you 2 slots for 4 XP. So you're right. Maybe I think either this card is ridiculous or I am underestimating the downside.
I mean,
one of those things is true.
I mean, I'm gonna play it because I'm pretty bored of Charisma. Like, it's just so low opportunity cost, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, and maybe more factions need to get a card like this before you taboo Charisma. Like I have talked to people about this, and definitely there's a feeling that there is some downside to tabooing Charisma before every faction has an answer, because it'll lead to some of the like tier 2 allies never getting played, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I can understand not tabooing Charisma until every faction has something like this. But I think if every faction had something like this, where it was like Charisma with an interesting downside, then I would be all for tabooing Charisma, because that one just is like straight up good.
You're right. I actually think that that's a solid solution to kind of the Charisma problem, which would be give something like this that's a more interesting twist on Charisma to all to each class, and then just delete charisma from the game, basically.
Yeah.
And then each class has a bigger opportunity cost to go in that direction, and does it in their own unique way instead of everyone shows up to the game, takes out their deck, and slaps their charisma on the table. It gets dull. So yeah, I would be happy. In fact, I wouldn't have minded if each of these just had, if those are like in all 5 of these investigator packs.
Yeah.
Clearly not, but this would have been a cool opportunity to do that, and then release the taboo that just bans charisma. Okay, there is one last card in the deck, and it looks pretty wild right off the bat. It is the Necronomicon Petrus de Dacia translation? Sure. It's a level 5. I think it's the only level 5 card in the pack. It's a level 5 Seeker asset. It costs 3 resources. It has 5 agility icons on it.
Book icons.
Did I say? Oh, I said agility. Intellect, book. I don't lower myself to your level and call them books, but I should probably not call them agility. Okay, it's an item, a tome. It sits in a hand slot. It uses 6 secrets and has limit one per deck, which makes sense because there's 1 in the pack. It says, fast action, spend 1 secret, you get +2 skill value for this test. Or fast, spend 2 secrets, draw 2 cards. 3 secrets, discover 1 clue at any location. Or 4 secrets, deal 3 damage to an enemy engaged with you. Whew. Okay. I feel like this lives up to its 5 XP.
Yeah, I like the spend 2 to draw 2 cards. I think the +2 skill value will be good situationally. The 3 secrets one I think is pretty situational. Like, it would have to be a location that's very hard to get to spend half of a 5 XP on discovering a clue, which is something seekers are really good at. And then the 4 secrets one is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're all situational things. With, you're right, draw 2 cards being something you're usually happy to do, but you might not want to just, and I guess this doesn't even exhaust, so if you wanted to just drop this on the table and draw 6 cards, you could. But you might rather keep the flexibility for these other purposes for a little longer. So I think that they're mostly quite niche, but I think when you put them all on 1 card, you're gonna find a time to put these to pretty good use. I think this is pretty cool. Also, that I was saying that there were not very many tomes that excited me about returning them to my hand with the library docent and refreshing their secrets. This one, probably the exception. Of course, now that we have a level 5 tome that uses secrets, like, this is the one we want to bounce.
Yeah, that is a great point. I definitely looking at this, the fact that one of the options uses 2/3 of the secrets. I'm thinking, like, how do I get as many secrets on this as possible? There's a few cards that provide 1 or 2 secrets.
Yeah, there's nothing that's like gonna double its secrets or do anything crazy.
And that's what I was thinking, is like, if there's a contraband for secrets in the future, like, I think that could be really fun, like a play style where you want to, like, add a couple secrets, get this up to 8, and then you double it, and then you just start doing crazy stuff.
Secret event called, like, 2nd edition or something, 2nd volume. Yep.
Yeah.
I could see it. Yeah, I think that this is just kind of an all-purpose bomb card that is, well, okay, I was gonna say that you're not really gonna build a deck. You're not gonna build a deck towards it, but that's maybe not even as true anymore, because, like, Library Docent is a great example of building a deck around it, and Wit and Green is. So I do think that kind of tomes are an archetype more than they've ever been, and they've always kind of been because people like Daisy have them written right on their investigator card. But yeah, I think that, like, the tome deck with Necronomicon as kind of the icing on the cake sounds really cool.
Yeah. Another thing to note is, well, I guess this doesn't discard itself when it's out of secrets. So
Right.
But if you have a way to discard it, such as just playing lots of domes in your deck,
or just lots of hand slot items, yeah.
Yeah, magnifying glass. Secret decks sometimes with their crazy draw and their big hand, like, especially if you have a 15 card hand size, you're cycling through your deck pretty fast, so you could overwrite this and draw it again pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's something you'd consider as you approach the end of your deck the first time, is like, oh, let's finish off that Necronomicon so that I can draw it again. Totally.
Totally. You can also use it for 5 skill icons if you're near the end of your deck and you know that my deck's only going to be 5 cards. So, like,
Yeah,
I'm just going to throw it into a test and then draw it again.
you're absolutely right. Nothing. Yeah, it's strangely the 5 intellect icons are not the most exciting part of the card, but it's a pretty big upside to the card too. That makes sure that if you draw it late in the game and can't afford it, or really can't afford to let go of either of the two things already in your hands or something, you've still got a pretty badass use for this card.
Yeah, or if there's, if you're playing something like Glyphs and you're like, you actually want to succeed by 10, like, why not throw this in there?
True.
Especially if you're going to draw it in a few turns when you cycle.
It's a high XP deck at that point, but yeah. Okay, that's it. We made it. And I think we did it in like less than an hour this time. Maybe not a lot less than an hour. We're tightening up. What do you think of Harvey? Let's start with, what did you think of these cards?
I thought most of these cards are really cool. Like, I think the card that we were the most down on, like, wasn't even bad. It was just like a little underwhelming for 4 XP. I don't think any of them were bad.
Yeah, I think that this is probably my favorite of the 3 we've looked at so far. Probably my favorite, like, array of leveled up cards. I think that the Rogue ones were also pretty exciting once we got to Chuck at the end. Chuck Fergus, that really transformed our take on all the other events that had been in there. And the Necronomicon even did that a little bit here for me with the Library Docents. Not as dramatically, but still. But overall, like, I'm pretty stoked about all these insights, if only for to try them out with Joe. The Forbidden Tome is exciting, and I can't say enough how stoked I am to have gotten the untranslated version and the upgrades in the same product instead of waiting 4 months, because that was cute in the Dunwich cycle, and I've been over it since then. And yeah, I'm really stoked. I love it. I think this is probably, if I was going to recommend that someone buy one of the packs that we've seen so far, between this, Jacqueline, and Winnie, it would be this pack.
Yeah, I think the one thing that was missing is I didn't see a super compelling reason to play this playstyle in Harvey over Mandy or Daisy.
Yeah.
The fact that they can actually do the big hand without a big downside, that might be the more straightforward way to play that.
Sure.
So I'm curious. I mean, I'm definitely down to try Harvey with the big hand size, but I'm curious what the optimal build for him will actually end up being, if it might be something different.
Yeah, you're right. I think that Harvey himself is not that exciting. Like, his ability seems strong enough, and his stats are good for what he wants to do, but you're absolutely right, his weakness is just such a huge setback to the big hand strategy that's an issue. But I think, yeah, I might even just almost take this deck and just put Mandy on it. Right? Like, the deck seems fun otherwise. It's chock full of these big hand cards, which we haven't really seen be a thing yet. And then I think, and we touched on this with Winnie, I think that I do see kind of the 2 upgrade paths, which I like in this pack. There's kind of you can further develop the big hand thing with your experience, or you can go in the tome direction. And I think that they both, probably more of the tomes, but they both seem really interesting.
And I think for the first time ever, at least 2/3 of those tomes you consider outside of Daisy, which is like, if you remember our old pack reviews, like, every single tome, it was like, well, maybe I play this in Daisy.
Yeah,
like,
even if it was a Mystic card, right? Like, yeah. So we finally got some really compelling tomes that are more than just a Daisy card, but would also be great for Daisy.
Yeah.
Except for the Necronomicon, like, her tote bag helps her carry it, but it doesn't use actions, so Daisy kind of doesn't care.
Yeah, I mean, she's probably playing a lot of tome synergy cards, so that could be a reason.
Especially now that we've gotten all these new ones. Good point. Okay, I think that does it. Thank you for joining, Steven.
Of course.
And for spending your Monday night talking about Arkham with me. Cheers. I think maybe you finished your beer by now. I'm still.
Tiny
Oh,
bit
there we go. All right, cheers. And thank those of you who watched and are still watching at this point as we wind down the review. We really appreciate it and love your feedback and your comments. And if this is your first time joining us or you haven't subscribed yet, please do. That really helps us out. It helps us grow and helps more people see the channel, which we love. So that's much appreciated. With that, we'll be back with 2 more decks. We've got Stella and Nathaniel. They may or may not be in that order. We haven't decided, but we got those 2 left to go. And then by that time, looking at the calendar, Innsmouth will be out. So we will be doing these until Christmas, I think, and we'll see you then. So till then, be optimal. Good night.